Galw'r Cynulliad Cenedlaethol I drefn ar eitem gyntaf yn agenda ni'r prynawn yma yw cwestiynau i'r Prif Weinidog a'r cwestiwn cyntaf Neil Hamilton.
Will the First Minister make a statement on what the Welsh Government is doing to support leisure centres across Mid and West Wales?
Yes, local authorities are responsible for public leisure centres. They provide funding for leisure centres through the revenue settlement, and of course it is for them to decide the pattern of services across their county area.
I thank the First Minister for his reply. He's a well-informed chap, and I'm sure he knows that there's a public meeting tonight in Knighton to consider the proposal by Powys County Council to close the leisure centre in Knighton. This will be very bad news for the town, of course. Mary Strong, the head teacher at the primary school, says the school uses it every single day. It keeps the community together, which is important, as communities like Knighton have lost so much over the years, and also it's very difficult to travel by public transport in this part of the country, so having this on the doorstep, of course, is a vital local resource. Will you encourage Powys County Council to keep the Knighton Leisure Centre open?
Indeed I would. I mean, they've had a better settlement than they would have expected, even if they are not able to continue funding the leisure centre. There are examples across Wales where the local community has managed to take the leisure centre over. But nevertheless, given the fact that their financial situation is better than they would have expected, then I would encourage them to examine every way of providing a service to the local community.
Angela Burns.
Of course, First Minister, leisure centres play an important role in rehabilitation. People who've had heart attacks, strokes, suffer from diabetes, have COPD, are people who very often will go to a leisure centre after they've done their 6 mandatory weeks of physiotherapy. How do you square that public health need with the fact that so many leisure centres are under threat by local authorities at the moment? And what do you think that your government could do to ensure that local authorities realise that this is a very important part of somebody getting better and leading a more secure, happy and integrated life going forward?
Well, indeed, we know that social prescriptions are hugely important, that pharmaceutical intervention is not the be-all and end-all for people, and that's why it's important that a network of leisure centres is maintained across the whole of Wales. And whilst leisure is not a statutory duty for local authorities, leisure is nevertheless a hugely important issue, both locally and important in order to enable people to continue to live healthy lives.
Joyce Watson.
First Minister, do you agree with me that we often see very many claims that are disputed afterwards by highly paid consultants about the transference of providing a service? And I'm talking particularly here about the Unison report against the transfer of the service, the leisure facility services in Pembrokeshire, which is, in their words, not in the best interest of the people who would want to access those services, and neither would it be necessarily in the best interest of those people who currently work within those services. So could I ask you, First Minister, to seek some assurances from Pembrokeshire County Council when they're trying to negotiate their way through transferring, in my opinion, what shouldn't be transferred in the first place?
Well, it's a matter ultimately for the Council, of course, but from the perspective of the Welsh Government, we would never want to see a situation occur where staff find that they have inferior terms and conditions as a result of changes to the way a service is delivered. Our preference would be for services to be delivered in-house.
Simon Thomas.
Mae'n anodd gweld sut allwn ni cyflawni amcanion y bil llesiant cenedlaethau dyfodol heb fod gan pobl ifanc a pobl yn gyffredinol yn y gymuned mynediad at ganolfannau hamdden ac yn benodol at nofio sy'n fan o cwicilwm cenedlaethol. Felly, fel sydd newydd cael ei cwbwyll, mae cyngor disgyblion ysgol Tyfyclo wedi sgwennu ata I a nifer o aelodau eraill yn mynegu I siom mewn dwe ar y ffin sydd wedi I arwahanu drefi eraill bod nhw'n colli adnodd mor bwysig. Wy'n croesawu'r ffaith bod chi wedi gweud y dyle yr adnodd mae cael ei cadw ar agor. Mae wedi cael setliad well yn ariannol, yn fanol oherwydd y cytundeb rhwng Plaid Cymru a'r Llywodraeth Lafur. Beth allwch chi wneud fel Llywodraeth I roi cyngor penodol i'r Cyngor Sir Bowys ynglyn â'r bosibiliad o symud y adnodd yma I mewn I dwylo gymuned, achos mae'n amlwg bod y gymuned yn trosoddi'r adnodd a bydden nhw'n cadw'r pwll ar agor?
Wel, un yn glir, taw y dyle'r cyngor I ystyried yn fanwl y bosibilrwydd o gadw'r ganolfan ar agor. Os na, felly ystyried sicrhau bod na gyfle i'r gymuned i rhedeg y ganolfan i hynna. Mae'n enghreifftiau hwnna dros Gymru'n gyfan gwbl. Wrth gwrs, beth byddwn neb moyn gweld yw gweld canolfan yn cael ei gau heb bod yr opsiynau hynny yn wedi cael ei ystyried.
Mae cwestiwn 2 wedi ei dynnu yn ôl. Cwestiwn 3, Hannah Blythen.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the Welsh Government's strategy to strengthen links between Wales and the USA?
Well, the current political landscape around the world means relations with the US are more important than ever. Economically, politically and culturally, we do maintain a strong presence in the US, including opening our latest office in Atlanta, and I visited the USA in September and plan to visit again next year.
Thank you. Thanks, FM. Wales has many historic links with the USA. A number of the signatories on the Declaration of Independence were Welsh, and I'm sure you'll agree that there is much to be made of these historic links to promote trade and tourism, the former all the more important in the light of Brexit. Indeed, today is potentially a historic day in the USA. As citizens go to the polls in election, I'm proud just to have played a tiny part in Philadelphia, in which you could see for the first time a woman make it to the White House as president. Who wins the White House has an impact beyond the boundaries of the USA. With that in mind, I'm sure many here will join me in hoping America chooses Hillary Clinton over the alternative and to see hope Trump hates. Does the First Minister believe that in 2016 it's time that we saw a woman President of the USA?
These are matters for the US population, of course, but I can see the strong point that she makes. For me, what is hugely important is that the relationship with the USA continues, that the USA doesn't become an isolationist, nationalist country, and nothing happens after the election that imperils the commitment of the USA to NATO. I think these are all issues that concern us, and I can certainly well understand the strong feeling that with a glass ceiling having been broken last time in 2008, that another one needs to be broken this time.
Paul Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, dwi'n siŵr y byddwch chi'n cytuno fi bod Sir Benfro yn cynhyrchu llawer iawn o gynnyrch gwych sydd yn rhoi Sir Benfro ac yn wir Cymru ar y map, ac mae'n hanfodol bod y Llywodraeth yn gwneud popeth yn ei gallu hirwyddo ein cynnyrch ymhellach i ffwrdd i wledydd fel yr Unol Daleithiau. Dwi'n sylweddoli bod Llywodraeth Cymru yn adolygu eich chefnogaeth allforio ar gyfer busnesau bwyd a diod, ond allech chi ddweud wrthyn ni pa gymorth ychwanegol y gall Llywodraeth Cymru ei gynnig i gynnyrchwyr bach sydd yn edrych i allforio eu cynnyrch i wledydd fel America?
Mae yna gyngor ar gael trwy tîm sy'n yma yng Nghaerdydd, ond hefyd cyngor ar gael o'r swyddfeydd yn America. Bydd na grŵp yn mynd i America yn hwyrach mis hyn, sef Trade Mission, mwyn i weld pa fath o ddiddordeb sydd ar gael o fuddsodwyr mewn i Gymru, ond hefyd wrth gwrs i sicrhau marchnadoedd newydd i gynhyrchwyr o Gymru.
Mark Reckless.
The outgoing president suggested that the UK might find ourselves at the back of the queue if we voted for Brexit. Given what has happened with the referendum results, the election of a new president today, but also the stalling of the TTIP negotiations and the formidable challenges they face, is it actually possible that Wales within the United Kingdom may actually see us take the European Union's place and go to the front of that queue?
I doubt it. His party has been very strongly against TTIP for reasons that are not European. Now, if TTIP is an agreement that will be presented for the UK, then his objections would still remain. I've heard objections from many who have called into question the ability of governments to provide public services with TTIP as it currently stands, so I assume that he would be as vehement in his objections to TTIP if it would be a UK-US agreement as he would have been if it had been an EU-US agreement.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinwyr y pleidiau. Arweinydd y Ceidwadwyr Cymreig, Andrew R.T. Davies.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As a party that broke the glass ceiling some nearly 40 years ago now, First Minister, I'll gladly hand the Labour Party the manual on how to elect a female to be leader, should you care to read that manual. But I want to ask you a serious question on business rates, if possible, please, First Minister. With the recent revaluation of businesses, the length and breadth of Wales, many businesses face horrendous increases in their business rates. What is your view on the revaluation that has taken place and the position that many small and medium-sized businesses find themselves in?
Three things. I would expect most businesses to see a reduction in their rateable value, if only for the fact that the last valuation took place in 2008, before, of course, the world economic crisis that occurred after that. Secondly, however, of course, our small business rate relief scheme will continue to reach more businesses, a great percentage of businesses, than is the case in England. And thirdly, we are putting in place a transitional relief scheme, £10 million of new money, which will help those businesses who are looking at substantial rises in their rates following the valuation. One thing I should add, of course, businesses, if they feel that they have been overvalued, should contact the Valuation Office agency as quickly as possible in order to raise their concerns.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. The Leader of the House and myself attended a protest in Cowbridge, but I've been to many towns over the last fortnight, and it seems to be an example coming time and time again of certainly secondary retail properties and also hospitality areas seem to have done pretty poorly under this revaluation, and many are facing a huge increase in their rateable values, well over 100% in many instances. I hear what you say about the measures that the Welsh Government have put on the table, and they are welcome, but it does seem as if, certainly in the transition, should the consultation be taken forward by the Minister to the new regime in April 2018, unless more is done in this current budget round to offer more assistance to some of those businesses who find themselves on the wrong end of these valuations, they just aren't going to be around in April 2018. Can you offer any comfort to the businesses that do find themselves bearing these huge increases in their rateable values, that the budget process will look at trying to release additional funding to enable a softer landing for many of these businesses in the new era of business rates?
Well, again, I make mention of the fact that £10 million is being set aside in new money for a transitional scheme to help businesses who do face these difficulties.
I regret that you weren't able to offer some more comfort than that, because certainly the businesses I have spoken to, when they've looked at the 10 million transitional money that is available, do not believe that that will go far enough to help them to stay in business. And I don't underestimate the offer that the Welsh Government has made, but there are some very, very genuine concerns out there that with the new regime that is in place on the valuation from April 2017, businesses just will not be able to continue. And so I do think it's regrettable you haven't been able to offer some comfort that with the budget round continuing at the moment, you cannot look at the budget lines and maybe try and find additional resources to help some of these businesses in the transition. But you also touched on the Valuation Office and the appeal structure, which is well understood by many of these businesses. I've been told that many businesses have an horrendous time accessing the Valuation Office and in particular just been able to get the process underway so they can challenge some of these valuations. Will you work with the Valuation Office to make sure that when businesses do contact them, they do get a timely response? Because I do fear for the financial well-being of many of these small businesses that have approached myself and many other members from across the parties in this chamber, and they will not be with us after April the 1st unless they get some assistance.
Well, I don't want to undervalue their position in any way. Could I ask the Leader of the Welsh Conservatives to write to me with those examples? He's made mention of one particular town. He's made mention of businesses that have experienced difficulty through the appeals process and have seen a potentially large increase in their business rates. If you could share those examples with me, I will, of course, look at them in order to inform our position in terms of the next year or two.
Arweinydd Grŵp UKIP, Neil Hamilton.
Diolch, Llywyd. The government a few days ago announced that there would be a cut to the budget for climate change projects of 36%, as UKIP stood in the last election on a policy of cutting this budget. I'm glad to see that the First Minister is coming our way, just as on managed migration. Although I think it's rather quixotic that the big cuts are coming in flood defences, which are necessary quite regardless of the theories on man-made global warming. But will the First Minister accept that even the IPCC believes that there's been no global warming since 1998 and that there was only a 0.4% rise in global temperatures between 1975 and 1998, which is similar to the period between 1860 and 1880 and again between 1910 and 1940. So is it not good sense, therefore, not to be spending huge sums of money on the consequences of a theory which are merely conjectural?
Firstly, I like to look at the weight of evidence when we deal with a particular scenario, and the overwhelming weight of evidence from those who are qualified is that climate change is happening and that human activity has an effect on climate change. Now, if climate change isn't happening, then clearly we need to re-examine our flood defence policy, because we're spending money on flood defences that apparently aren't needed. Because, of course, we are putting in place flood defences to deal with flooding events that have occurred in some parts of Wales where they've not been experienced before, and the residents of Talabont in Ceredigion will provide evidence for that. We're also looking to provide defences for people based on what the experts tell us will be an increase in global temperatures and a subsequent disturbance of weather patterns over the next few years. I mean, climate change is something that doesn't happen over 5 or 10 years. It happens over many, many decades. And it is measured not necessarily in the span of a human lifetime either.
Well, the First Minister will know that I believe these are mere oscillations, but I'm interested in and all the historical evidence proves that. But I'm interested in the effect upon the life and livelihoods of our electors of government policy. He will know that 23% of households in Wales are in fuel poverty on the government's own definition. That's 291,000 households. And that 20% of the average fuel bill in a house now is accounted for by green taxes. On an average household bill of £1,500 a year, that's £300 a year. For somebody on a very low income, that is a very significant diminution in their real standard of living. Is there not something that the government can do to benefit the lives of ordinary people by opposing these green taxes and restoring some semblance of sanity in our policy on climate change?
It's a question of sanity, then the insanity he displayed along with his party in the 1980s when our coal mining industry was closed down is testament to that. I mean, I welcome his conversion, but one thing I have to say to him is that coal as a source of fuel is not going to return in the UK. The deep mines are gone. They've been built over. There are buildings and homes over them. The only option is open casting. If he wishes to advocate that, he is welcome to join me and the residents of Kenfig Hill in my constituency who have particular views on open casting and having to live next door to what is at the moment a dormant and derelict open cast site. The reality is that we have a choice as a nation. Either we seek to import more energy, be that natural gas from, for example, Russia, or we seek to import even more liquid natural gas. We seek to import coal from other countries in the world. That is one choice. Or we go for energy security. And we develop an energy system that draws on renewable energy, but is also secure for us in the future. That, I think, is the perfectly sensible option.
Well, the First Minister will know that the percentage of electricity generated by wind power or solar energy is minute, typically between 3 and 5%. So the idea that energy security can be obtained by more and more windmills is nonsense and would result in the utter desecration of our countryside as well. But I'm interested in the impact of green taxes upon poor people. His party came into existence in order to fight for the interests of working people. But it's his party, more than all, because of the Climate Change Act, which his government introduced in 2008. And in the government's own assessment of its costs would be 18 billion a year, 720 billion pounds over 40 years. This is a crown of thorns that's being put down on the heads of ordinary people.
I cannot stand here in all seriousness and listen to a man with his history lecture me about standing up for working people. Yeah. This is somebody who sat there in Parliament in the 1980s and waved through the greatest act of industrial vandalism that the UK has ever seen. The destruction of jobs in the steel industry, the erosion of the coal industry, communities having their livelihoods destroyed by a government that did not care. The enemy within is what the party opposite called the very working people of South Wales and the United Kingdom. We stand up for working people, we stand up for energy sources that are safe, and we will continue to make sure, first of all, that people don't forget what the parties opposite did to them in the 1980s, and we will continue to ensure that people have jobs, they have secure energy and fairness, replacing what the parties opposite took away from them.
Aran Plaid Cymru, Rhina Piorwerth.
Diolch, Llywydd. Ydy'r Prif Weinidog Ydy'r Prif Weinidog yn ymwybodol o faint y broblem o gyn aelodau'r lluoedd arfog yn dioddau o broblemau iechyd meddwl, ac ydy o'n derbyn beth wedodd y cyn bwyllgor iechyd wrth ddisgrifio cefnogaeth I gyn-filwyr yng Nghymru fel bod yn anigonol ac amrhiodol?
Na, dwi ddim yn derbyn hynny, ac wrth gwrs pob blwyddyn ni wedi datgan pecyn newydd i'r sydd wedi bod yn y lluoedd arfog, yn gwmws beth byddwn ni'n gwneud flwyddyn hyn hefyd. Mwyn sicrhau, wrth gwrs, bod gyda nhw ffyrdd o gael mynediad mewn I iechyd meddwl, a hefyd, wrth gwrs, iddyn nhw I gael help gyda phopeth eisiau nhw unwaith maen nhw'n gadael.
Da ni ddim yn gwybod yn union faint o gyn-filwyr sy'n dioddef o problemau iechyd meddwl, achos dydy'r ffigurau union ddim yn cael I gyhoeddi. Da ni yn meddwl bod rhyw 4% yn dioddef o anhwylder straen post-traumatic neu post-traumatic stress disorder. Da ni'n meddwl bod rhyw 1 o bob 5 yn dioddef o ryw fath o afiechyd meddwl. Lleiafrif o gyn-filwyr ydy hyn wrth gwrs, ond wrth I ni nesau at syl y cofio, mae angen I bob cyn-filwr wybod bod yr rhaid i'n gwasanaethu ochr yn ochr â nhw yn cael ei gwerthfawrogi a'i bod nhw'n cael ei gweld am yr hyn ydyn nhw, sef asedau i'n cymdeithas ni ac i'r gweithle ag ati. O ystyried beth wedodd y Pwyllgor Iechyd diwetha ac o ystyried beth wedodd y BMA wrth ddisgrifio cefnogaeth fel bod yn anghyson, pa gama mae'r Llywodraeth yn cynllunio i'w cymryd rwan I wneud yn siŵr fod gwasanaethau cyhoeddus yn trin cyn-filwyr Cymru sy'n angen cymorth mewn ffordd maen nhw yn I lawn heiddi?
Wel, mae man I hwn yn digwydd nawr, ond wrth gweud hynny, does dim un system lle system ddim gallu cael ei wella. Y ffordd I wneud hynny yw'r ffordd ni'n defnyddio, sef gweithio gyda'r cyrff sydd yn cynrychioli hynny sydd wedi bod yn y lluoedd arfog, mwyn wrth gwrs I ni gryfhau pecynau iddyn nhw. A mae yna berthynas da gyda ni rhwng y cyrff hynny a'r Llywodraeth.
The question is how much we do, of course, and Remembrance Week is a good time to remind ourselves that we owe a duty of care to former service personnel, and I have no doubt, of course, that the First Minister would agree with me on that. But the budget for the All Wales Veterans Health and Wellbeing Service is just £585,000. That's less than 1/100% of the overall health budget. Now, Plaid Cymru believes that a military wellbeing act is needed to ensure that support for veterans is consistent and of a high quality across the country, so all veterans know that public services will have a legal obligation to be there for their former comrades. So if, as most would agree, what Welsh Government is currently doing for veterans isn't enough, will the First Minister pledge to legislate during this Assembly to ensure that when it comes to housing or medical care, no veteran is left behind?
The effect of legislation would be, but nevertheless the sentiments that the member expresses are ones which I share. That we want to ensure that our veterans get the best package possible and the best deal possible once they have left the armed forces. That is done through working with veterans organisations such as the Royal British Legion. It's done through ensuring there is sufficient funding available specifically to help veterans over and above funding for the general population in areas such as health. And we'll continue to examine what the most effective ways are of improving that service in the future.
Cwestiwn 4, Llyr Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog datganiad am blant yng Nghymru a ddysgu'r gartre?
Wel, ni'n cydnabod hawliau rhieni I ddysgu eu plant gartref. Ni hefyd yn cydnabod hawliau plant I gael addysg effeithlon ac addas I gael grondawiad ac I fod yn ddiogel. A mae'n canllawiau digwydiedig a fydd yn cael ei gyhoeddi cyn bod hir yn adlewyrchu.
Diolch am eich ateb. Byddwch chi, dwi'n siŵr yn ymwybodol bod y Comisiynydd Plant wedi galw ar y Llywodraeth I gyflwyno canllawiau statudol I gwneud i'n ofynnol I rieni gofrestru I y ffaith I bod nhw'n addysgu plant adre, ac mae wedi gwneud i'n glir yn ddiweddar yn y Pwyllgor Plant Pobl Ifanc ac Addysg hefyd, y bydde hi yn barod I ddefnyddio ei phwerau statudol mwyn annog y Llywodraeth I symud i'r cyfeiriad yna. Byddech chi felly yn cytuno â'r Comisiynydd a finne a nifer o bobl dwi'n siŵr fod pob diwrnod oedi yn rhedeg y risg fod unigolyn arall, a mae rhaid dweud arall yn anffodus, yn cael ei gadael lawr gan y Llywodraeth yma, a mi bod nhw yn rhedeg y risg o fod yn mynd o dan y radar.
Wel, awdurdodau lleol wrth gwrs sydd ar prif gyfrifoldeb, ond dwi ddim yn gweud wrth gwrs bod yn cyfrifoldeb o gwbl gan Lywodraeth Cymru. Ni o'n sicrhau bod canllawiau sydd yn dod allan yn canllawiau sy'n cryfhau sefyllfa awdurdodau lleol ac yn egluro beth yw dyletswyddau hefyd hawliau rhieni, plant ac wrth gwrs awdurdodau lleol. Ac wrth gwrs, bydd ni'n dal i ystyried faint mor effeithiol bydd y canllawiau hynny i weld, i sicrhau bod nhw yn effeithiol ac i weld os yna eisiau newid y system yn y pen draw. Ond ni'n hyderus ar hyn o bryd bydd y canllawiau hynny yn mynd llawer ymhellach mwyn sicrhau diogelwch plant.
David Rees.
Well, First Minister, it's interesting and pleasing to hear that the statutory guide or the guidance will be issued very shortly, because in my own authority there's a known 114 children who are being home educated, but there's only one part-time officer working with those. Can you also ensure that the guidance is going to enforce and put more pressure on local authorities to have a sort of a relationship between the number of children they see and the officer, so that 114 for one is not adequate? We need to ensure more officers are actually working with those home educated children so they get the best support possible.
Well, clearly it's important that local authorities have enough people to work with home educating parents and home educated children. We will consider carefully if there are any further steps that will need to be taken. Regulation might be appropriate in the future, if necessary, in order to support home educated learners, but our approach is to use this guidance to make sure that local authorities are able to get the clarity that they need to act swiftly where they feel that they have to. We will, of course, continue to work with the professionals in order for them to be able to work effectively with those families who do home educate.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. Some families freely choose homeschooling, while others feel they have no alternative because the alternatives to school education for a troubled child are limited. While the number of the latter has dropped, the number of the former has increased from over 1,000 5 years ago to over 1,500 last year. What does that say about the confidence of families who choose to, about the confidence in our school education system that they choose to homeschool? And for those families that enrol but then withdraw their child, how sure are you that budget cuts, as has happened in Swansea, haven't reduced the child's entitlement to an appropriate level of education? No,
there are many different reasons why parents choose to home educate. I don't believe that the system as a whole is a reason for that. We are seeing ever improving education results in Wales, and of course we're seeing budgets having been protected and investment in schools, unlike of course the situation across the border.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. How does the Welsh Government ensure that homeschool children will receive a good standard of education?
Well, the guidance, of course, will help to continue to ensure that, providing local authorities with the clarity that they need to ensure that the education that is provided is of a sufficient standard.
Question 5, Mike Hedges.
Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on no cold calling zones in Wales?
We know that no cold calling zones help to make people feel safer in their communities. We know the number of homes covered by zones continues to increase. What we are never sure of is whether cold calling zones include political canvassers.
That's absolutely true. No cold calling zones are popular with residents. When delivering leaflets during half-term in areas without no cold calling zones, I noticed a large number of houses with no uninvited trader stickers on their doors. What can the Welsh Government do to support councils in expanding the areas covered by no cold calling zones?
Well, in March 2013, a baseline review established 38,000 homes were covered by the zones. In November of 2013, we invited local authorities to bid for funding to support the creation of zones in their areas. After only 12 authorities requested funding and just under £35,000 was provided. That said, the number of homes covered by zones has now increased to 53,000.
Russell George.
First Minister, I certainly believe that more needs to be done to protect consumers against unsolicited mail and nuisance calls. According to the Office of Fair Trading, these types of scams are estimated to cost the victims around £3.5 billion a year. Can I ask, has the government considered imposing a levy on the sender of mail, similar to that, the carrier bag charge, of course allowing that money to be reinvested in different areas such as the forestry industry, protecting rural post offices or helping local authorities to recycle waste? I
think the difficulty with that is that most of the mail does not originate in Wales. The carrier bags, it's easy enough. The carrier bags are in the shop in Wales to begin with. It's an issue that if we expand it more widely, applies to waste. Most of the waste that comes into Wales and is generated as waste isn't actually from Wales to begin with. For me, the answer lies in a UK and I'd say European approach to this, because we know that certainly within the UK, unsolicited mail is still a problem. It's not as it was, because of course email is much easier now, and as I'm sure we all know in this chamber, the scourge of telephone calls by organisations who are outside the telephone preference service. I'd be very supportive of any legislation at UK level that would strengthen the rights of people to avoid these calls in the future with suitable penalties if needs be.
Cwestiwn 6-2 Lloyd.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am enwau llefydd hanesyddol Cymru.
Mae enwau lleoedd hanesyddol yn rhoi tystiolaeth werthfawr I ni o ddatblygiad ein cenedl. Mae un o ofynion deddf yr amgylchedd hanesyddol Cymru 2016 yw fod Weinidogion Cymru yn llunio rhestr o enwau llefydd hanesyddol a fydd yn cofnodi'r drafftadaeth gyfoethog hon ar gyfer y dyfodol.
Diolch yn fawr am yr ateb yna, Prif Weinidog. Nawr, mae'n wedi dweud, fel da chi wedi nodi dros y blynyddoedd dwytha, mae yna nifer o esiamplau o enwau hanesyddol Cymraeg a'r hen dau, a'r hen blastau, a'r hen ffermydd. Mae'r enwau hanesyddol Cymraeg mae gyd wedi dod o dan fygythiad yn aml ac yn wir rhai yn cael ei newid i'r Saesneg. Ydych chi fel Llywodraeth yn cytuno bod yna potensial I ddatblygu deddfwriaeth lle bydd angen derbyn caniatâd gan awdurdod cynllunio cyn ymyrryd ag enwau hanesyddol Cymraeg?
Mae hwn yn rhywbeth ni wedi ystyried, ond pan edrychon ni ar hwn, mae yna mwy o enwau yn cael ei newid o Saesneg I Gymraeg na'r Gymraeg I Saesneg. O achos hynny, ym mha ffordd felly byddai'n bosibl I blysmona hwn trwy system cynllunio. I fi, dwi ddim yn un sydd o blaid newid enwau Cymraeg I enwau Saesneg, sef enwau llefydd. Gweud hynny, wrth gwrs, mae Comisiynydd yr Iaith wedi sefydlu panel mwyn rhoi iddi hi cyngor ag argymhellion ynglyn â ym mha ffordd allan ni sicrhau bod ein treftadaeth yn yr iaith Gymraeg yn cael I warchod.
Paul Davies.
Prif Weinidog, mae yn bwysig bod enwau lleoedd hanesyddol Cymraeg yn cael ei diogelu mwyn I bobl ddeall ein hanes lleol yn well, ac hefyd mae'n helpu gadw'r hanes yna yn fyw. Mwyn helpu diogelu enwau lleoedd hanesyddol, yn ogystal â cyhoeddi rhestr, pa ganllawiad eich Llywodraeth chi wedi cyhoeddi hyd yn hyn?
Yn sôn, wrth gwrs, am beth wedi sy'n gynharach yn un beth mae'r Comisiynydd wedi wneud sydd yn rhywbeth wy'n croesawu. Fel rhywun sydd yn byw mewn tre, lle mae yna broblemau enfawr ynglyn â rhai strydoedd achos y ffaith bod enwau'r strydoedd wedi bod yn Gymraeg os degawdau wedi cael ei gyfieithu yn amlwg yn wael mewn y Saesneg, does neb yn nawr yn gwybod le maen nhw'n byw. A mae yna sawl enghraifft ym Mhen y Bont lle mae'r enwau Cymraeg I hewlydd wedi cael ei camsillafu, wedi cam ddehongli, wedi cam gyfieithu hefyd. A felly does neb yn gwybod le maen nhw'n nawr. So mae fe'n beth bwysig, achos mae bobl wedi cael credyd o achos hynny. A dyw'r satnaf sy'n gweithio chwaith. Ond mae'n dangos bod yn rhywbeth sydd yn bwysig dros ben, mwyn sicrhau bod gyda ni un enw yn y Gymraeg sydd yn cael ei ystyried fel yr enw swyddogol, lle mae'r enw yna wedi bod yn enw hanesyddol dros degawdau a chanrifoedd.
Cwestiwn 7, Dafydd Ellis Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd, bydd y cyfarwydd Prif Weinidog ac ysgrifennydd gwladol Cymru I drafod Bil Cymru.
Trafod Bil Cymru gyda'r ysgrifennydd gwladol yn sawr achlysur y tro diwetha dros y ffôn dydd Gwener diwetha. Mae'n bwysig dros ben, wrth gwrs, bod Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig yn ateb yn gadarnhaol ac yn bositif i'r adroddiadau sydd wedi cael ei gyhoeddi'n ddiweddar.
Oeddech chi rhywun callach, Prif Weinidog, ar ôl eich trafodaethau? Oherwydd ydw I a'r arglwyddau sydd yn eistedd ochr arall wedi bod yn bresennol mewn 3 eisteddiad yn barod o Bil Cymru. Wedi derbyn rhyw gymaint o ymateb positif oddi wrth y Gweinidog yr arglwydd bon o Aberystwyth. Ond mae'n amlwg I fi nad yw swyddfa Cymru yn ddim byd ond atodiad i'r benyddiaeth gyfiawnder. A mae Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig yn y modd mwyaf anneallus I sydd unwaith eto yn ceisio ysgrifennu cyfansoddiad Cymru. Pryd y dawr dydd y cawn ni ysgrifennu'n cyfansoddiad fan hyn yn gwlad yn hunain?
Wel, fi'n cyd ymdeimlo beth yr eol i ddweud, wrth gwrs. Mae'n anffodus bydd y bil hyn ddim yn fil sydd yn fil cynhwysfawr i setlo cyfansoddiad Cymru am ddegawdau, nid felly bydd y bil. Mae'n rai bethau positif yn y bil, a ni moyn gweld mwy o bethau positif ar ben hwnna. Wedi trafod hwn gyda'r arglwydd Bôn hefyd, yn hiro'r glwyddi, a fel cyn aelod o'r lle hyn, mae yna ddealltwriaeth dwfn dy fe o beth o'r materion sydd yn holl bwysig. Ond i fi, beth sy'n bwysig yw bod gyda ni bil sydd yn symud ni ymlaen, bydd ddim yn symud ni ymlaen digon pell, wrth ystyried barn rhan fwyaf o'r aelodau yn y lle hyn, ond mae yna waith i wneud mwyn sicrhau bod y bil yn rhywbeth allwn ni i ystyried ac i gefnogi yn y pen draw. A ni'n edrych ymlaen i weld beth yw ymateb Llywodraeth y Daearn Unedig ynglyn â rai o'r materion sydd heb wedi cael ei ddatrys eto.
Nick Ramsey.
First Minister, as you say, there has been progress made, and aside from some of the constitutional issues that David Alstom referred to, this bill will give power to the Assembly over such things as the name and electoral arrangements. So there is, well, progress has been made there. However, can I ask you, First Minister, tax devolution is part of and indeed running in tandem with the Wales bill. What progress is being made in the development on the fiscal framework, so important to ensure that Wales receives its fair share of funding when the block grant reduces to make way for Welsh tax revenues?
Good progress is being made in discussions between the Cabinet Secretary and the Chief Secretary of the Treasury. A settlement that will be acceptable to all and is good for Wales. There are other areas, of course, which remain outstanding, and we hope to see a positive response from the UK Government in those areas.
Nathan, Steffan Lewis. Apologies. Steffan Lewis.
Diolch, Llywydd, I think. The existing constitutional arrangements cast doubts on the ability of the Assembly to defend its areas of competence in the context of Brexit. But what assessment has the Welsh Government made of the current incarnation of the Wales Bill in terms of the Assembly's ability to defend its areas of competence? And will the First Minister, in light of the current incarnation of the Wales Bill, give serious consideration to introducing a great continuity bill in this Assembly to affirm the Assembly's competence on matters that may be transferred from the European Union to Wales and the United Kingdom?
I mean, 2 points. First of all, the Wales Bill itself will not be a comprehensive solution to Wales's constitution. We'll still have anomalies where this Assembly will make the law in terms of most public order, but the agencies that enforce public order law will not be answerable to the Assembly or the Government. It will be possible, under the current arrangements, for somebody to be arrested in this city for an offence that is not an offence in Wales, but is in England. It will be possible for somebody to serve a sentence in England for an offence that is an offence in Wales, but not in England. These are the anomalies that are thrown up with the settlement. So there's much to do in making that more coherent, although it will not be as coherent as I would have hoped. The bill he makes mention of, really, we must see what's in the so-called Great Repeal Bill. If all it does, this is the way it's been presented, if all it does is simply enshrine existing EU law in all the jurisdictions and countries of the UK, then I can understand the sense in that. And we will look at the situation afresh to see whether there's any need to proceed along the lines that he suggested once the detail of that bill becomes clear. But the principle will be, of course, that no power should be lost to the people of Wales, and that any powers that transfer from Brussels in devolved areas come straight here. They pass go, but unfortunately do not collect money on the way.
Question 8, Nathan Gill.
Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's policy on business rates?
Well, we're committed to supporting small businesses through our Small Business Rates Relief Scheme and Transitional Relief.
Thank you, First Minister. Small businesses tell me that they are hanging on by their fingernails. There are some winners as a result of the recent revaluation, but there are many, many more losers. I received an email last night at midnight from a small business owner outside of my constituency who had seen that I was going to be asking this question today. She felt so strongly about it. She contacted me to say that her reevaluation has resulted in a 48% increase in her rateable value. Now, I know that many business owners and their employees are desperate for this government to consider introducing the same terms around small business rates relief that the UK government they've responded to the consultation that you guys have asked for, and that's what they've said. So the question really I've got for you is, are you going to listen to them?
Well, I would argue that what we have in place is more generous now than is the case in England. Why? Because it reaches more businesses. 70% of businesses will receive some form of support through the Business Rates Relief Scheme. Over half of eligible businesses will pay no rates at all. That is far in excess as a percentage of businesses than is the case under the system in England, though it would appear on the surface to be more generous. But in fact, the reach of the Welsh scheme is deeper. That said, of course, we do recognise there may be some businesses who will lose out as a result of revaluation, as there always are whenever there is revaluation, which is why we have introduced, or will be introducing, the Transitional Rate Relief Scheme.
Russell George.
First Minister, Labour candidates in the Assembly elections this year met with small businesses across Powys during the election campaign and told them, vote Labour and get a tax cut. And I do quote one candidate who said, business rates tend to form a higher proportion of the total operating costs for small businesses, and many Powys businesses are under serious financial pressure, and so will breathe a sigh of relief if Labour is returned on May the 5th. Now, many of these businesses, or these businesses that were being referred to, are now facing a business rate hike. So what do you say to these businesses who were told by Labour candidates that they would get a tax cut in their business rates, who will now be paying more in business rates?
Well, they clearly are, because, as I say, 70% are having a tax cut as a result of a scheme which has been temporary but renewed every year for some years. There is no permanence to the current scheme. We are introducing a permanent scheme next year in order to make sure that we have a scheme that is durable, because businesses cannot exist on a system where the rates relief scheme is simply renewed every year without them knowing whether it will be or not. And we've continued to make sure that the vast majority of Welsh businesses get the relief that they need.
Question now, Lynn Neagle.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the impact of the benefits cap in Torfaen?
Well, the estimate is that around 200 households in Torfaen will be affected by the UK government's lowering of the benefit cap in 2016 to 17, with an average loss of £60 per week if they don't respond by moving into work or increasing their hours.
Thank you, First Minister. Unfortunately, yesterday's extension of the benefits cap will, I believe, ensure that more children are pushed into poverty by the Tories' welfare reforms. The figures that you have given are absolutely correct. £58 per week is a significant sum of money, and there are some 516 children who are in households who are affected. A number of those families are already in rent arrears, and of course the fear now is that they will have to choose between buying food for their families or paying their rent. There's been a very strong partnership approach in Torfaen, led by the Council, to mitigating the impact of welfare reform, and much of that work has been done under the auspices of Communities First. Given the Welsh Government's current consultation on Communities First, what assurances can you offer that whatever emerges from that consultation, this work will continue to be a priority for Welsh Government?
Well, clearly, we want to keep the best practice that has been established over the last few years, and the Cabinet Secretary has, of course, said he's minded to phase out the Communities First programme, but also, of course, to develop a new approach to building resilient communities. And, of course, which is why the engagement process is so important for us, to hear examples that the member has referred to, in order to make sure that that best practice continues in the future with the new arrangements.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Presiding Officer, does the First Minister agree that there has to be a maximum level of financial support that claimant can expect the state to provide, and that people on benefits should not be able to receive more than the average working family earns in work in Wales?
Well, I regret the fact that the UK government has withdrawn benefits of those in work. People in work, their circumstances would improve and their incomes would improve, and they have been hammered as a result of actions taken by the UK government. The bedroom tax is another example of that. I certainly deplore the actions over the last few years, where those who are the most vulnerable have been the ones who have suffered the most, while as those, of course, at the very top end of the income stream had a tax cut. If there was anything more regressive as a tax policy, then that was it.
David Rowlands.
Diolch, Lewis.
Will the First Minister agree with me that there are many hard-working families in Torfaen who would be delighted with a take-home pay of £400, which may well be the reason why 1% of the unemployed in Torfaen have declared they do not want a job?
Well, I don't know where he gets that figure from. What I can say to him is that our unemployment rate is...
The First Minister is answering the question. First Minister.
Our unemployment rate is 4.1%. We continue to provide jobs for our people. I regret the member's tone because I don't believe that's his true view. His view, I believe, is that there was a time in this country when there was a contract between people and the state, where the state would do what it could to provide housing, education, to provide good health net if they became unemployed. That has been whittled away over the years, and when he tries to pit people who are unemployed against those who are employed, I think that is the wrong way forward. The reality is, for many people, they struggle to get work because of sometimes disabilities. They struggle to get work, which is why they need extra help and qualifications, which we are providing. But ultimately, I don't agree that demonising people who are on benefits is actually a good way of building cohesion in society.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Dwi wedi derbyn